Now, how do we know this? Because the Founding Fathers told us this. We could spend the whole day talking about examples of this. I'll just give you a few. Tom Jefferson in April of 1790 wrote a memo to George Washington noting the Constitution has declared, quote, the executive power shall be vested in the President, submitting only special articles to a negative by the Senate. The transaction of business with foreign nations is executive altogether and belongs to the head of that department, except as to such portions as are specially submitted to the Senate, which are to be construed strictly. 3 days later, Washington wrote in his diary that he had discussed Jefferson's memo with James Madison and Chief Justice John Jay, and they agreed that the Senate have no constitutional right to interfere in the business of diplomacy, save for their approbation or disapprobation of the nominee, all the rest being executive and vested in the President by the Constitution. Where? Article 2, Section 1. 3 years later, Jefferson's chief rival, Alexander Hamilton, wrote, as the participation of the Senate in the making of treaties and the power of the legislature to declare war are exceptions out of the general executive power vested in the President, they are to be construed strictly. Tom Jefferson, in 1804, 15 years into our government, noted in a note to Albert Gallatin, our Secretary of the Treasury, the Constitution has made the executive the organ for managing our intercourse with foreign nations. And he noted from the beginning of the government, under Washington, Adams, and his own administration, it has been the uniform opinion and practice the whole foreign fund was placed by the legislature on the footing of a contingent fund in which they undertake no specifications but leave the whole to the discretion of the President. The standard way money was appropriated for foreign affairs is set forth here. Congress gave the money $40,000 and $50,000 and said the President shall account specifically for the expenditures that can be made public and for the amount of other expenditures. No, none of this give us a secret report. They knew Congress could not be trusted to keep secrets. What about the Supreme Court? In the most famous foreign affairs case, Curtis Wright, in 1936, the court noted, not only as we've shown is federal power over external affairs in origin and character different from internal affairs, participation in the exercise of the power is significantly limited. Into the field of negotiation, the Senate cannot intrude, and Congress itself is powerless to invade it. That was the general understanding until Vietnam. After Vietnam, Congress has started passing hundreds of pages of bills, thousands of pages of bills, telling the President what to do in foreign affairs. Those statutes, I would submit, are unconstitutional. In Curtis Wright, the court noted, as John Marshall said in his great argument in 1800, the President is the sole organ of the nation and its external relations, its sole representative with foreign nations. The Supreme Court endorsed it. This is not something invented by George Bush or one of his minions. As late as 1959, Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Bill Fulbright, said, the preeminent responsibility of the President for the formulation and conduct of American foreign policy is clear and unalterable, save by constitutional amendment. And note, he doesn't just say the President is the agent for communicating. The formulation and carrying out of foreign affairs. Now, what about warrantless wiretaps? In Federalist number 64, John Jay talked about there being important sources of intelligence who would not confide in the secrecy of the Senate or the House of Representatives. And he said, therefore, the Constitution was wise to require the President in making treaties to get the advice and consent of the Senate, yet, and I quote, he will be able to manage the business of intelligence in such manner as prudence may suggest. That has historically, until 1973, been the understanding of all three branches. Congress made no effort to get involved in secret intelligence matters. Indeed, Henry Clay, as a member of the House in 1818, when an issue arose over a delegation in Latin America that had not been confirmed by the Senate, said, obviously, the President has this contingent fund, and if the compensation of these people had come from that fund, it would not have been a proper subject for inquiry by Congress. In 1968, in the first wiretap law, Congress specifically recognized by saying nothing in this chapter shall limit the constitutional power of the President to obtain foreign intelligence information. That is to say, Congress understood collection of foreign intelligence as part of the executive power is not covered by wiretap laws. In 2002, the appeals court set up by FISA, I worked in the Senate when FISA was enacted, I said it was unconstitutional in 1978. The unanimous Court of Appeals set up by FISA noted that every case to consider the issue had declared that the president did have inherent authority to conduct warrantless searches to obtain foreign intelligence information. And the court went on to say, we take it for granted the president does have this power, and assuming that is so, FISA could not encroach on the president's constitutional power. 5 minutes, just got its tag, thank you. What about, and let me address a point that David made. Does the president have the right to ignore the law? No. The president has to choose between laws. We have a hierarchy of laws in this country. At the very top is the Constitution. Unlike many countries, in our system, the Constitution is supreme to treaties and to international law. When the president gets in a setting where he has to choose between obeying the Constitution and enforcing a law enacted by Congress that he believes is contrary to the Constitution, I think the answer is his duty to the Constitution is a higher duty. We'll talk about that. In Curtis Wright, the Supreme Court noted that Washington refused to provide sensitive diplomatic information to the House of Representatives, and it went on to say this refusal was recognized by the House itself and has never been doubted. Professor Ed Corwin, on the question of executive privilege, notes, so far as practice and weight of opinion can settle the meaning of the Constitution, it is today established, this was 1957, the President is final judge of what information he shall entrust to the Senate as to our relations with other governments. During the debates on the Jay Treaty, one member of the House of Representatives said the House had a right to executive branch documents. James Madison said the President, this is his decision. If he doesn't think the information can be made public, he doesn't have to release it. That was the understanding throughout most of our history. In the Nixon case, striking down a claim of executive privilege, the court repeatedly noted, we're not talking about military or diplomatic secrets. In those areas, courts have traditionally shown the utmost deference to presidential responsibility.